Welcome to the Vibrant Yogi podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey, and if you're here, it's because you're ready to dive into conversations about the tough stuff, the fun stuff, and of course, everything in between. This podcast is about finding inspiration to live a life full of purpose, meaning, and yes, vibrancy, even when it feels like things aren't really going your way. We'll talk about the ups and downs of life, the lessons learned, and the moments that make it all worthwhile. So, make yourself comfortable and let's explore how to live a vibrant life with intention and authenticity, one conversation at a time. All right, friends, welcome to episode 2 of the Vibrant Yogi podcast. I am so grateful that you are here. And today we are talking about everything cold capping. And so if you are new to the Vibrant Yogi space and you are like, what the heck is this girl talking about? Well, cold capping is a way that people are managing to hold onto their hair during chemotherapy. And I actually did it back in 2019 and had a lot of success with it. And back when I did it, nobody was doing it. And so it's becoming much more prevalent now. But I still think that there's a lot of people out there who don't know about it, who could really benefit from it. And so that's what we're going to be covering in today's show. We're going to talk about how it works. We're going to talk about my personal experience with it. And even the people who are using it in the media right now, in the limelight. It is just getting so much more exposure, which awareness is key, right? This is how we learn, this is how we grow, and this is how we find resources that are available to us. So keep this one, put it in your back pocket. You might not know somebody going through cancer now, but this is one of those things that you can come back to at any point that you need and can just be a really good resource. So let's hop to it. All right, so what the heck is cold capping? How does it work? If you are only listening to this podcast, I encourage you to head over to YouTube to check it out so you can see what an actual cold cap looks like. If you are watching, this is a cold cap. So what I am holding is this blue and pink gel-filled cap. And essentially, it goes onto your head really, really nice and tight. And they're Velcro straps. And the idea is that these caps are frozen solid. They sit in dry ice, and you rotate through 5 or 6 different caps, and you change these caps every 30 minutes. And so it is quite the commitment as you're hooked up. You're sitting there hooked up to an IV, getting pumped through or pumped full of chemo. So you really do need somebody who is dedicated to help you with it. And it is no joke. Like it can be really, really challenging and really uncomfortable. And so the way that it works, the science behind it, without getting too sciencey, is essentially it is freezing the hair follicle so that the chemo drugs don't penetrate that hair follicle. And while this is really great for somebody who might be doing IV chemo, if you're someone who, like me now, is doing oral chemo, it wouldn't work for you because you would literally have to wear it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And let's be honest, nobody is doing that. So it is definitely best suited for IV chemotherapy. And not all types of chemotherapy work with it, but a lot do. And so this is one of those things that you can either talk to, I find quite often, if I'm being really honest with you, oncologists and the people at the cancer center, from my experience here in Canada, have not been super stoked about it. Whereas in the States, they have it built into a lot of their facilities. So it really depends region to region the response that you're going to get and the knowledge that you're going to get. And so you can always reach out to the cold cap companies, and they are a wealth of knowledge. I used something called Polar Cold Caps, and the lady at the other end of the help desk, I'll never forget her. Her name's Inez, and she is just the sweetest lady in the whole wide world. And she she knows everything about different types of chemo and how long you need to keep them on before, after, during, all of that stuff. And you can tell that she is in it because she loves it. The other reason I chose that company was because it was actually started by a man named Antonio, whose wife was diagnosed with cancer. And so it really came from pure intentions, which for me just really, I don't know, it just aligned with the direction that I wanted to go. And there is choice out there. And so just do your research, see what's close to you, see what's available to you. But that was personally the brand that I used and one that I had lots of success with. All right, so when it comes to that initial diagnosis, after you kind of catch your breath from the holy crap, I have cancer side of things, the next thing for me that I automatically thought about was, holy smokes, I'm going to lose my hair. And I mean, yes, there is definitely some vanity behind it. This is my security blanket. This is my identity. This makes me feel feminine and like myself. And so that's one side of it. But the other side of it that so many people don't think of, who are like, oh, it's just hair, it'll grow back, was that keeping my hair through cancer allowed me to choose who knew that I was sick and who didn't, right? I did a TED talk on this, and that's something I'll put into the show notes so that you can check it out and go a little bit more in depth into it. But in that talk, I kind of touched on that the fact that when you have cancer and you are going through treatment, you lose your hair, you lose your eyebrows, you lose your eyelashes, you really lose your sense of anonymity. Like you do not get to choose who knows you're sick. You go into the grocery store and you just want to run in and run out, and then people are giving you those sad eyes. And you know, people think that it's okay to approach you about it and talk to you about it and tell you these horror stories about their aunts, uncles, cousin who had the same type of cancer from you, and it was such a bad experience. You're like, excuse me, this doesn't really help me out. So for me, I really loved the fact that it made me feel like in this world where I was really feeling out of control with my future, my treatment, like I just felt like everything was spinning. This was one thing that I was like, okay, we can focus on this. I can give my mom and my mother-in-law this task to do. They can help me with this massive, massive experience. And it really just kind of grounded me back into feeling like my world was not just like this crazy spiral of emotions. The other thing was that, I mean, I have kids, and at the time when I first was diagnosed in 2018, they were really little. And explaining to them, you know, why mommy is in bed or why mommy has no hair, those are tough conversations. And it's not to say that those aren't conversations that we could have and that we could handle, but to me, it was just really nice being able to show up as myself. Like I still looked like myself, and therefore I still was able to feel a little bit more like myself. And that brings me to my last point of why cold capping was something for me that just completely made sense. And that was the fact that I'm a yoga instructor. I want to be able to do a down dog and not have my wig fall off. And that's not to say that you can't rock that bald, beautiful head. For some women, that is right. And guess what? That's fine, right? We all have choices. We all have options. And for me, it just was something that really was a no-brainer. Um, I have so many friends who went through chemo and didn't cold cap and lost their hair and felt that it was extremely liberating to, shed this layer of yourself, right? And so it is a really, really individual sort of journey that you're on. And just because it's right for me doesn't mean that it's right for everyone. But I think that the key is sharing this knowledge and knowing that we have choices, we have options, and that we are still in the driver's seat when it comes to different different avenues that we can explore throughout our treatment. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the logistics of cold capping. And so it is not for the faint of heart. I will be very honest with you. It is a long ass day and takes a lot out of you, the cancer patient, but also the people who are supporting you. It is like you got to be on. So, what the day looked like for me, and again, this may vary from company to company, or if of course you're using the automated caps, that's going to look totally different. But for the manual caps, the day started really early. My mom would go out and get dry ice. So she would get these massive slabs and then these little pellets. And we would pack this cooler, like a Coleman cooler, nothing fancy, full of this dry ice. And you would layer ice, cap, ice, cap, ice, cap, so that the caps would get freezing cold. And when I say freezing cold, I mean like a freezing cold. And so you would go to the hospital, and for me, I would usually have to check in about half an hour before my appointment. And so, an hour before you actually started the transfusion was when you would want to put on your first cap, and that's to bring your scalp down to temperature so that when the infusion starts, it's not going to that follicle. So, right before I would check in at that 30-minute mark, I would put on my first cap, and oh my gosh, it was like brain freeze, like massive, massive brain freeze, but from the outside in rather than the inside out. And I would I would ask everyone to stop talking to me. I would just put on my headphones, I would close my eyes, and I would be like, okay, I am on a warm beach. No, my head is not freezing. No, my ears are not freezing. No, my scalp is not freezing. And I would just do everything I could to calm my nervous system, to breathe through it because it was super, super uncomfortable. The other thing that you would have to do, and I'm sure things have probably come further since when I did it, but I would get a panty liner and stick it to my forehead so that I would not get freezer burn or frostbite along my forehead. And then I would use these little earmuffs to protect my ears. And let me tell you, I learned this the hard way because the very first time I didn't cover like the little part right where my center part is. And I like lost a layer of skin from frostbite. So really important that you cover those sensitive areas if you are going to give it a go. I eventually started using moleskin, which was a lot easier because you could cut it to the exact shape that you wanted and you could layer it and get a little bit more, you just had a little bit more freedom with it. And so that kind of became my go-to once we were seasoned pros. Uh, but yeah, so then we would put on the first cap and I would check in. They would give me my pre-meds. So that's like the anti-nausea, the steroids, like all the things that they load your body up with to be able to handle the chemotherapy. And then right before they would start the infusion, or sorry, this is a lie. I would do my check-in, and then when I started my pre-meds, that would be about half an hour before I was actually going to start the infusion. So we would change the cap. So we would get from the very bottom where the coldest caps were, we'd get a new cap. You'd temp it with a temperature gun, make sure it was really nice and cold, and then you would put that new one on, and you're just kind of getting used to the temperature of the first one, and you're like, oh my God, okay. And so only the first two or three caps are uncomfortable. And then once you hit that point, you're numb. You're totally frozen. You're hooked up to the IV. The chemo drugs are kicking in. You're just like smooth sailing. But yeah, those first three are definitely a little bit of a challenge. So you set your timer every 30 minutes, every 25 minutes actually, my mom and my mother-in-law would get the new cap out. They would put the warm cap all the way down to the bottom, and then they would start to work their way up. And so every time they made their way to the top, it was the cap that had been in the longest. And so I would do that for the entire infusion. And depending on what type of chemo you're doing, it is different lengths of time. So for me, I did AC, which is nicknamed the Red Devil. We started calling it Red Soldiers because we didn't want, I don't know, I didn't want to think of it as like something attacking my body. I wanted to think of it as something that was working for my body and helping my body and fighting for my body. And I truly believe that because I thought that way, my body received it a lot better. I didn't have any really adverse effects. I mean, obviously, I felt like super crappy, um, but I didn't have, like chemo blisters or anything like that. And then I switched to paclitaxel, a different type of chemo, and so that required a different length of time as well. So I would wear it the entire transfusion, and then depending on the type of chemo, so for AC, I went a little overboard and I would wear the cap for like 4 or 5 hours after and still do the changes because I was like, oh, I really want to keep my hair. And like, I would drink so much water and I would try and pee out as much of the chemo as I could. I don't know if it actually worked, but for me, in my brain, I was doing all the things. And then for the paclitaxel, hair loss isn't usually as prevalent. So I think I only wore it for maybe an hour, maybe two after each round of that. And so I did 8 rounds total of chemo. And I definitely lost a decent amount of hair. Not for me, it wasn't patchy. For some women, it's patchy. For some women, they don't lose any at all. Um, and so it was a general thinning for me, I would say. But I did lose, I want to say like 60% of my hair, but I still looked like me. And after about, I don't know, I want to say maybe 6 weeks post final chemo, so after my last round of chemo, was when my hair started to feel solid in its follicles again. I didn't feel like I had to baby it so much. And that was when I actually ended up getting tape in hair extensions. So my girlfriend Tamara, who's done my hair forever and just incredible, um, was just such a genius with how she styled my hair, how she cut my hair. And yeah, I got these tape in extensions. And after I got those, I mean, nobody would have known that I went through chemo. And I felt so vibrant. I felt so good. I was on top of the world that, finished chemo, doing radiation, and I still looked and felt like myself. I did lose my eyebrows and my eyelashes. And so I have microbladed eyebrows. Thank God, because you wouldn't have known where my eyes were. Everything was like so bland. And so what I would do is I would just use a black eyeliner to eyeline the top of my eyelid, and that would kind of give the illusion that there was some eyelashes there. And I mean, you can't even wear fake eyelashes because they have nothing to sit on. I tried, and it was like one really sad one and then one like really concerned one, and it wasn't a good look. So I kind of ditched that quite quickly. So yeah, I definitely think it's something that when you are thinking about cold capping, if you are thinking about cold capping, consider all of the things. It is not a walk in the park. It is definitely challenging, but for me, and again, my experience with it, it was super, super worth it. So, one other thing I wanted to talk about with cold capping that may not be popular opinion, but I felt quite often with the cold capping that because I kept my hair, sometimes people didn't realize how sick I was. And like, yes, that's the goal, but at the same time with Ryan, my husband, I'd be like, dude, do you know what I'm going through right now? Like, do you remember? And he would try. Like, he was amazing through it all. But because you look normal, like quote unquote normal, they people around you sometimes forget that you are like fighting the fight and going through all of the things. And I even found in a couple of the Facebook groups that I was in, which I don't know if I would say that that's like the best space to be if you're actively going through treatment, because yes, there can be so much information in there, but it can also be terrifying and scary because you hear a lot of people's absolute horror stories. And so I would have to constantly remind myself that their story is not my story, but it's still, I don't know, it's still got into my head. So there's like this fine balance that you have to find between using it as a resource, but then also really protecting your own mental health and your mental wellness, and not doing the doom scrolling. But I found really, really interesting that there was a few people who, how do I say this without absolutely sparking things? People who did lose their hair looked at me like I didn't experience the full thing. Like my cancer wasn't as bad as their cancer was, or my experience wasn't as hard as their experience was because I didn't go through the full effect of it. And that for me was something I really like. Even now, I'm super uncomfortable talking about it because you never want to throw shade at people in your own community. Like everybody's suck is the same and yet completely unique to them, right? Like your suck is no worse than my suck. They are both really, really crappy circumstances. And it's not like this comparison of who had it worse, and right, like I feel like it's important not to get into that. And so that was one thing that if you are considering cold capping, I wouldn't spend a lot of time focusing on it, but I would just be mindful of it that, some people out there might be resentful of it or might have judgment on you for the choices that you make. And that goes with basically everything in life, but just to be aware of it because you're in a particularly emotionally vulnerable space and you're like, who is throwing shade? Well, I am in like the shittiest days of my life, right? And so just being aware of it and knowing that it is a possibility is something that, I would tread lightly with. So I hope that you learned something in today's podcast. If you have other questions about cold capping or if you have experienced cold capping yourself, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on Instagram. I absolutely love chatting to people in the breast cancer community, even not if breast cancer, but other types of cancer. I love hearing your experiences and I love hearing different perspectives. And that is what this podcast is really all about. And so, again, totally a personal choice. Might be right for you, might not be right for another person. But knowing that we have this power, this choice, is really the message that we are trying to convey. And I am trying to get across to you guys today. And so, if you found this podcast helpful, I would so appreciate it if you share it with people, if you leave it a review, so that we can help spread the word and get the information to even more people who need it. Join me next week for the Vibrant Yogi podcast for episode 3, where we talk about a really uncomfortable space that I have found myself stuck in time and time again. It's where, you're not quite the person that you were, but you don't know who you're going to be. You're feeling like unmotivated, not sure of your purpose. And we call this liminal space. And some of us exist here for months, for weeks, for years, and it is the biggest thing that holds us back, fighting this liminal space, not moving through this liminal space with purpose. So next week we are going to talk about all things liminal space. So I hope that you check us out, and thank you again so much for joining. Your support means everything.